It was a Tuesday afternoon, a day like any other, until I picked up my husband's phone. A woman's whispered, "I love you" was a knife to my heart, but it was the voice times that truly shattered my world. It was my Aunt Geraldine. Until that precise moment, my life in Maplewood Heights had been a perfectly curated masterpiece. A vibrant tapestry woven with threads of unwavering love and domestic bliss. Nolan, my husband, was the very bedrock of our existence. A man whose easy smile and comforting presence promised a lifetime of security. Our twin boys, Jackson and Jeremiah, were 5 years old. Identical bundles of boundless energy and unadulterated joy. Each day a new adventure in finger painting and boisterous laughter. Our home, a charming colonial nestled among ancient oak trees, hummed with a rhythm of peace and contentment. A sanctuary I had tirelessly built with Nolan over a decade. Family was paramount to me, a sacred bond that stretched beyond the conventional. My parents, Walker and Alice, lived just a few blocks away, their wisdom and support a constant in my life. But it was Aunt Geraldine, my mother's younger sister, who held a particularly cherished place in my heart. She was less an aunt and more a second mother, a confidant, a vivacious force of nature who filled every room with her infectious laughter and sparkling wit. Geraldine was single, having never married, and she poured all her maternal instincts and affection into us. Her extended family, she was at every birthday, every school play, every holiday gathering, often bringing a casserole or a perfectly baked cake, her arms always open for a hug. We shared shopping trips, long coffee dates, and whispered secrets late into the night. She was my safe harbor, my unwavering ally, the one person I believed I could trust with absolutely anything. Nolan, too, adored her. He'd often tease her good-naturedly, and I'd watch them laugh together, grateful for the easy camaraderie that enriched our family dynamic. He'd even call her, or she him, for advice or just a friendly chat, a habit I'd always found endearing. A testament to how deeply she was woven into the fabric of our lives. The Tuesday in question had started innocently enough. Nolan had left his phone on the kitchen counter, a rarity for him, as he usually carried it everywhere. I was clearing up the lunch dishes, humming a tune Jackson had picked up from a cartoon. The phone vibrated, lighting up with an incoming call. Thinking it might be important for his office, and knowing Nolan was in the garage fixing something, I picked it up. "Hello?" I said, my voice light. A woman's voice, hushed and intimate, flowed through the receiver, an urgent whisper that made my blood run cold. "I love you," she breathed, the words heavy with a tenderness that twisted my gut. "Don't forget the ring and the watch this time, darling. See you tonight." My fingers tightened around the phone. The Times ring times and the Times watch asterisk, and then, the voice spoke again, a soft sigh. "Be careful, my love." It was undeniably Geraldine. My aunt. My beloved aunt. The phone slipped from my numb fingers, clattering against the tiled floor, the sound echoing the shattering of my perfectly constructed world. The tiled floor felt impossibly far away, yet the sound of the phone hitting it was deafening, a percussive crash that reverberated through the hollow space where my heart had been moments before. Disbelief, cold and sharp, pierced through the initial shock. No, it couldn't be. Geraldine, my vibrant, loving aunt, my mother's sister, my confidant, and Nolan, my steadfast, devoted husband. The two pillars of my perfect world were not just crumbling. They were actively tearing each other down, taking me with them. My knees threatened to give way. I leaned heavily against the cool, unforgiving counter, gasping for air that felt thin and toxic. My mind replayed the whispers, the possessive, "I love you," the intimate details of a forgotten ring and watch, the final, soft, "Be careful, my love." Each syllable was a fresh stab, twisting the knife of betrayal deeper. A wave of nausea swept over me, and I squeezed my eyes shut, wishing I could unhear, unknow, unfeel. But the truth, ugly and undeniable, was now a festering wound in the core of my being. Footsteps from the garage, Nolan's familiar stride snapped me back to a semblance of reality. He couldn't see me like this. Not yet. I had to breathe. I had to compose myself. My hands trembled as I bent to retrieve the phone, my fingers brushing against the cold ceramic. "Everything okay, honey?" Nolan asked, poking his head through the kitchen door, a smudge of grease on his cheek. He looked so normal, so innocent, so utterly oblivious to the apocalypse that had just unfolded inside me. "Just dropped a spoon," I lied, the words tasting like ash. It was the first lie, but I knew, with a chilling certainty, it wouldn't be the last. From that moment, my world shifted into a surreal, high-definition observation deck. Every interaction, every glance, every casual touch became a piece of a twisted puzzle. Nolan's easy laughter, once so comforting, now seemed hollow, a performance for my benefit. His late nights at the office, once accepted without question, now festered in my mind as potential illicit rendezvous. I watched him, a silent sentinel in my own home, searching for tells, for cracks in his carefully constructed facade. Did his eyes linger a moment too long on his phone? Was that an unfamiliar scent on his shirt? My paranoia became a constant companion, whispering dark suggestions. Geraldine, too, came under the same microscopic scrutiny. She started appearing more often, dropping by with baked goods or just to see the boys. Her hugs, once warm and genuine, now felt like an elaborate charade, her touch leaving a phantom chill. Her eyes, I noticed, darted nervously when Nolan was in the room, a subtle flicker of apprehension I had never seen before. Her laughter, usually so effervescent, occasionally sounded brittle, a little too loud, a little too forced. One evening, Nolan came home with a bouquet of my favorite lilies, just because, he'd said, his smile a little too wide. A few days later, a delicate silver necklace appeared on my pillow. These guilt gifts, as I silently dubbed them, were once treasured tokens of affection, but now they felt like poisoned offerings, glittering affirmations of his deceit. The air around us, once thick with unspoken love, was now heavy with unspoken lies, and I, Gloria, was trapped suffocatingly within it. The air might have been heavy with unspoken lies, but my mind was now a frantic detective board, meticulously analyzing every fleeting glance, every hurried whisper, every peculiar omission. The scattered fragments of suspicion began to interlock, forming an undeniable mosaic of deceit. Nolan's phone, once casually left anywhere, was now a guarded extension of his hand, clutched even during dinner, often face down, a subtle but screaming testament to a hidden life. His late nights at the office grew more frequent, the explanations dissolving into increasingly transparent excuses. A new client, a complex case, an urgent deadline. Once, he returned past midnight, muttering about a last-minute emergency, but a faint, unfamiliar floral scent clung to his shirt, clashing jarringly with the sterile office story. Another time, he claimed a boys' night with old college friends, yet a casual chat with one of them a few days later revealed Nolan had only dropped by for an hour, leaving early. Each divergence in his narrative wasn't just a gap. It was a deliberate, almost taunting misdirection, eroding the very bedrock of my trust. And then there was Geraldine. My memory, now a relentless curator of betrayal, began to unearth months, even years, of interactions, each one reframed through the grim lens of treachery. Her recent transformation, which I had previously attributed to a newfound zest for life, now screamed of a clandestine affair. The expensive new clothes, a bolder, more confident hairstyle, a sparkle in her eyes that I'd naively thought was happiness for my family, had it been a shared secret all along? I remembered moments. The way her hand would linger a second too long on Nolan's arm, when he reached for a coffee cup, the soft, knowing smiles they'd exchange across the dinner table that I'd dismissed as mere family affection. The way she'd always seemed to gravitate towards him at gatherings, their heads close in hushed conversations I'd never questioned. Once, during a family barbecue, I'd seen her playfully flick a piece of charcoal dust off his cheek, her fingers brushing his jawline with an intimacy that now made my stomach clench. It was all there, laid bare, a sinister pattern woven into the fabric of our family life, disguised by its very familiarity. The internal burden of this double existence, of being the sole, silent witness to my own tragedy, pressed in on me like an unyielding vice. Every breath felt shallow, every forced smile a mask I wore for my children, its weight pulling at my facial muscles. My nights were a crucible of agonizing analysis, endless hours spent meticulously replaying every suspicious interaction, every whispered word, until my skull throbbed with the effort. Sleep offered no true reprieve. When it came, it was fleeting and plagued by vivid, unsettling dreams, where Nolan and Geraldine's faces, distorted by deceit, seemed to mock my confusion. The once comforting walls of my home now seemed to echo with unspoken accusations, each room a silent monument to the pervasive lies. I felt utterly, terrifyingly isolated, held captive within the confines of a secret too monstrous to share. To unveil such a grotesque truth would not only obliterate my world but unleash a seismic shockwave through our entire family. My parents, particularly my dear mother, who adored her sister and her son-in-law. The thought of inflicting that pain was an unbearable weight on my conscience. A heightened, unsettling vigilance became my constant companion, injecting suspicion into every innocent glance, every casual conversation. I was bound by the desperate need for irrefutable proof before I could even contemplate freedom. The torment of not knowing, a ceaseless grinding ache, overshadowed every aspect of my being, threatening to dissolve the very woman I was. For weeks, my days blurred into a landscape of internal interrogation, each morning a fresh battle against the undeniable threads of doubt. A part of me still desperately clung to the familiar, yearning to dismiss the intimate whispers as a trick of an overwrought mind, Nolan's absences as genuine work, Geraldine's new sparkle as harmless joy. I tried to build walls around the intrusive truth, to convince myself that ignorance could still offer a perverse kind of peace, a way to reclaim the pristine facade of my life. But the images, the voices, the anomalous details I'd collected refused to fade. They were a persistent, corrosive acid, slowly dissolving the foundations of my carefully constructed world, leaving behind a gnawing void. This constant, unverified torment was a heavier burden than any confirmed betrayal could ever be. My sons Jackson and Jeremiah remained my only unblemished view of the world, their bright, innocent faces a daily, aching reminder of what I was fighting for. How could I continue to navigate this charade? A ghost in my own home, a mother present only in body, while my spirit was consumed by this silent war. The thought of them growing up amidst an unspoken truth, sensing the chill that had settled between their parents, was far more terrifying than any future confrontation. It wasn't just my sanity that was at stake. It was their very sense of security, their right to a life built on honesty. This agonizing state of almost knowing, this protracted self-deception, was slowly stripping me bare, leaving only a frayed, terrified replica of the woman I once was. The cost of continued inaction, I realized, was simply too high. The path forward wasn't illuminated by a sudden burst of anger or a dramatic epiphany. It was a slow, deliberate carving, a crystallization forged under the immense pressure of relentless uncertainty. I understood then that simply enduring this torment wasn't protecting anyone. It was merely prolonging my suffering and allowing the wound to deepen irrevocably. I could not, would not, build a future for my children on the quicksand of deceit. Nor could I heal from a reality I refused to acknowledge. The only way to reclaim true peace, to establish a foundation of unwavering authenticity for my sons, was to confront the ugly truth head-on. If my perfect life had been a meticulously crafted lie, then I would systematically dismantle it, not out of vengeance, but out of a cold, clear necessity for authenticity. A quiet, unshakable resolve settled deep within my core, replacing the paralyzing fear. It was not yet fury, but a chilling, almost surgical determination. I would find every shard of proof. I would peel back every layer of their whispered betrayal. I would no longer be a silent witness to my own demolition. I would be the architect of my own reconstruction. No matter the brutality of the revelations to come, the silent hunt was about to begin. A silent hunt required a silent guide, and there was only one person I trusted implicitly with the labyrinthine complexities of deceit and law: my father. Walker had spent 40 years navigating the treacherous currents of human betrayal in divorce courts. His mind a steel trap for legal strategy, his heart fiercely protective of his family. The thought of confiding in him, of unburdening this grotesque secret, filled me with a fresh wave of terror, knowing it would shatter his perception of Nolan, and worse, of his beloved sister-in-law. But my newfound resolve, cold and unyielding, insisted. This wasn't about emotion anymore. It was about strategy, about survival. I called him on a Thursday afternoon, choosing a time when I knew Alice would be out at her book club. My voice, I tried to make it sound casual, but the tremor was undeniable. "Dad," I started, do you have a few minutes to talk? Something personal." He picked up on it immediately. "Gloria?" "Of course, sweetheart. Are you all right? You sound preoccupied." I could almost feel his lawyer's mind, always sifting for nuances, already at work. "Can I come over?" "It's better in person," sitting across from him in his study, the air thick with the scent of old leather and pipe tobacco. The words refused to form. How did one casually drop a bomb like this? "It's about Nolan," I finally managed, my voice barely a whisper. I watched his kind, intelligent eyes narrow slightly. "Is he well?" he asked, his tone gentle, inviting. I think he might be having an affair," I confessed, testing the waters, leaving out the most crucial, most devastating detail. The lie of omission felt like a betrayal in itself. But I needed to ease him into the abyss. Walker didn't gasp or express outrage. He simply nodded, his gaze steady, unwavering. "I see," he said. And I knew he did. He saw beyond the words, recognizing the raw anguish simmering beneath my carefully constructed composure. "What makes you think that, sweetheart?" he probed. Not with judgment, but with the calm, methodical inquiry of a seasoned professional. It was his lawyer's voice, yes, but imbued with the deep paternal concern that had always been my anchor. He listened patiently as I recounted the subtle shifts, the late nights, the unexplained absences, the guilt gifts. I described the crushing weight of suspicion, the paranoia, the feeling of suffocation. But I still couldn't bring myself to say Geraldine's name. When I finished, leaving out the inciting incident, the call, and the voice, he leaned forward, resting his elbows on his desk. "Gloria," he said, his voice soft but firm, "this isn't just a suspicion. This is a deep certainty you're grappling with, and you deserve to know the truth. Beyond any doubt." He paused, his gaze softening. "As your father, my heart breaks that you're going through this, but as a lawyer I need you to understand something very clearly. Without irrefutable proof, suspicions, no matter how strong, are just that. They can't protect you. They can't secure your future or the boys." "So what do I do?" I asked, desperation lacing my voice. "How do I get proof without him knowing, without destroying everything before I'm ready?" "Carefully, meticulously, and legally," he replied, his tone becoming more professional, less paternal, though the love was still palpable in his eyes. "First rule: do nothing illegal. Do not hack his phone. Do not access his private accounts without explicit permission. Do not plant recording devices in the home. Any evidence obtained illegally can be inadmissible in court, and even hurt your case." He picked up a pen, twirling it thoughtfully. "What you can do, however, is observe, document, and systematically gather anything that is publicly accessible or that you have a legal right to. Think about bank statements, credit card bills, phone records, anything jointly held or where you have legitimate access. Look for patterns, for unusual spending, for calls to unfamiliar numbers or at odd hours. Photograph anything suspicious you see in the house, like notes or receipts, but do not take or alter his personal property. He outlined a cautious, step-by-step approach. Beyond that, he continued, if your suspicions are as strong as they sound, and for your peace of mind and the sake of your children's future, you will likely need to engage a private investigator, someone discreet, ethical, and experienced in matrimonial cases. They can conduct surveillance, verify movements, and, if necessary, obtain evidence that you cannot. He saw the hesitation in my eyes. It's a difficult step, Gloria, but sometimes, it's the only way to cut through the lies and find the clarity you need to move forward, to protect yourself and your sons. As he spoke, a strange mix of relief and renewed fear washed over me. Relief, because I wasn't alone anymore. Someone understood the gravity of my plight. Fear, because his words painted a stark picture of the battle ahead, confirming that my worst nightmare was not just a figment of my imagination, but a tangible, legal reality. Yet, beneath the fear, the steel resolve that had awakened weeks ago solidified. My father wasn't just giving me advice, he was handing me a weapon, guiding me on how to wield it. The silent hunt was indeed about to begin, but now, I had a seasoned strategist in my corner. Armed with Dad's counsel and a grim resolve, I began to dismantle the facade of my life. One cold, hard fact at a time. My first step was to scrutinize the joint accounts, the very bedrock of our shared financial life. I pulled up months of bank statements and credit card bills, spreading them across the kitchen island late one night after Nolan and the boys were asleep. What had once been a mundane chore now felt like an archaeological dig into the ruins of my marriage. Initially, there were only vague inconsistencies. A few unusual restaurant charges for two at establishments Nolan and I had never visited. Always on evenings he claimed to be working late. Then, a charge for a weekend stay at the Riverside Hotel, a place known for its romantic getaways, dating back 3 months. It wasn't exorbitant, designed to blend in, but the dates aligned perfectly with a conference Nolan had attended out of town. The proof wasn't explicit, but the patterns, when viewed through the lens of suspicion, glowed like neon signs. The phone records were next. A more painful excavation. Scrolling through the call logs, a hollow cavity opened within me with each entry. Nolan had always been in regular contact with Geraldine, a habit I'd cherished. Now, those calls became forensic data. There were dozens of them, stretching back over a year. Many late at night, some in the middle of the day when he was supposedly at his office, others when he was working out of town. The duration of these calls, sometimes exceeding an hour, each one a slow, deliberate poisoning of what I held sacred. Who discusses family news or logistics for an hour past midnight, repeatedly. There were also a few unfamiliar numbers that appeared frequently, often exchanged between Nolan and Geraldine, suggesting burner phones or secret lines. Each scrolled line, each unexpected charge, hammered down the lid on my failing trust, transforming vague dread into cold, hard certainty. The accumulated deceit compressed my chest, making each breath a shallow struggle. Every confirmed discrepancy was a shard of ice, lodging itself deep inside, stealing my breath. My initial internal turmoil had solidified into a chilling, unwavering resolve. But it didn't lessen the agony. The cumulative impact of the revelations bore down on me, a relentless pressure that made my lungs ache with every forced inhalation. The immense gravity of this prolonged deception, a meticulous construction of lies, warped the very atmosphere around me. I knew I had to escalate. My father's words echoed in my mind. For your peace of mind and the sake of your children's future, you will likely need to engage a private investigator. Through one of Dad's old colleagues, I found Evan Dean, a retired detective with a reputation for discretion and thoroughness. Our first meeting was in a nondescript coffee shop, my hands shaking around a lukewarm latte. Evan was quiet, observant, with a gaze that seemed to see right through me. but without judgment. I laid out my case, carefully omitting Geraldine's name initially, focusing on Nolan's suspicious patterns. When I finally whispered my aunt's name, his expression remained impassive, betraying nothing. He took meticulous notes, nodding occasionally. "I understand, Mrs. Miller," he said, his voice a low rumble. "We'll be discreet. Our job is to provide facts, not judgment." His professionalism was a balm, a sliver of sanity in my chaotic world. The reports started trickling in within a week. Generic emails at first, detailing Nolan's movements, confirming his late nights often ended not at the office, but at a secluded apartment complex on the other side of town. Then came the photographs. Blurry, grainy images, but unmistakably Nolan. And next to him, her face often obscured or turned away, was Geraldine. Photos of them entering that apartment building together, having intimate dinners in dimly lit restaurants, even a picture of them holding hands in a park. Laughing, a cold sickness bloomed in my core, twisting something vital. As I stared at the images, my husband, my aunt, the physical proof, stark and undeniable, was both a confirmation of my worst fears and a brutal shattering of any lingering hope. It was real. It was happening. Then came the audio recordings. Evan had managed to place a discreet bug, confirming the apartment was indeed their illicit rendezvous point. The first recording I listened to was short, just fragments of conversation, but enough to hear Geraldine's distinctive laughter, Nolan's familiar voice. My fingers trembled as I clicked play on the next file, and there it was. Their voices, clear, intimate, discussing plans, exchanging endearments, their affection for each other raw and sickeningly palpable. "I love you," Nolan murmured. The same words I'd once cherished from him, now directed at her. "You make me so happy," Geraldine whispered back. The very words that had once formed the foundation of my greatest joy now twisted into the instruments of my profoundest pain, their casual, comfortable banter, the planning of future trysts, the careless mentions of a ring and watch confirmed every single suspicion, every gnawing doubt, each piece of evidence, each photo, each whispered word, felt like a precise surgical incision, carving away not just my illusions, but pieces of the very self I had known. The sheer, immovable mass of this truth settled inside me, a permanent frigid anchor that never lifted. Sleep was a phantom, replaced by a relentless loop of images and echoes. My appetite vanished, leaving only a perpetual dryness and a metallic tang on my tongue. I moved through my days in a fog, a silent actress playing the part of a happy wife and mother, all while my inner world was a war zone of shattered trust and seething betrayal. The evidence was irrefutable, undeniable. I had what I needed, but the cost felt astronomical. My perfect illusion had been systematically demolished, leaving behind a stark, desolate landscape of lies. But at least now I could see clearly. And clarity, however painful, was the first step towards reclaiming myself. The weight of the evidence, though crushing, had also forged a new kind of weapon within me. The truth. It was a cold, gleaming blade, and though my hand still trembled, I knew it was time to test its edge, subtly, on the first betrayer. The agony of living with their secret, of maintaining the pretense, was becoming unbearable. I needed to see it, to confirm the festering guilt I knew lay beneath Geraldine's effervescent facade. Even if it meant risking everything. The opportunity arose during one of our routine Sunday family dinners at my parents' house. The air, usually filled with cheerful chatter, felt suffocatingly thick to me. Nolan was engrossed in a game of checkers with the boys in the living room, his laughter echoing, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing. Geraldine, perched on a stool in the kitchen, was helping my mother arrange a platter of fruit, her usual bright smile fixed in place. As she reached for a cluster of grapes, I moved closer, feigning interest in the dessert. "You look particularly well, Aunt Geraldine," I said, my voice deliberately soft, but with an undercurrent I hoped only she would detect. "That new hairstyle really suits you, and that dress. It's quite daring for Maplewood Heights." wouldn't you say? I watched her, subtly, as her fingers paused for a fraction of a second on the grapes. Oh, thank you, dear, she said, her smile faltering for a beat before snapping back into place, perhaps a touch too wide. Just decided it was time for a change, you know? A little self-indulgence. I nodded, maintaining eye contact. Self-indulgence can be good, I mused, picking up a strawberry, my gaze unwavering. Nolan mentioned you'd been spending a lot of time by the riverside lately. Such a beautiful area for a walk. Or, perhaps for other things. Her hand visibly twitched, dropping a grape onto the cutting board. Her eyes, usually so sparkling, now held a frantic cornered look. Oh yes, the Riverside Hotel has a lovely new cafe, she stammered, her voice higher than usual. A forced lightness that grated on my ears. I meet friends there sometimes. It's so pleasant by the water. The hotel, I knew from Evan's reports, was the very place of Nolan's conference, and the romantic getaway charge on his credit card, a detail too specific to be a coincidence. Indeed, I replied, a chilling calm settling over me. It's funny, isn't it? The places we find solace, the secrets we keep hidden in plain sight. Sometimes the most beautiful exteriors hide the ugliest truths. I let the words hang in the air. A silent accusation. A thinly veiled threat. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my face remained impassive. Geraldine's composure finally shattered. Her eyes darted to Nolan in the living room, then back to me, wide with a naked fear that sent a shiver down my spine. The color drained from her face, leaving her pale and drawn. Her fingers fumbled with the grapes, and she quickly turned away, mumbling something about needing to check on the oven. The pretense had evaporated, replaced by the unmistakable tremor of guilt. My aunt, my cherished confidant, was a confirmed liar and a betrayer. Later that night, long after the boys were asleep and Nolan was feigning sleep beside me, I lay awake. The image of Geraldine's terrified eyes seared into my memory. Her reaction, however fleeting, had been all the confirmation I needed. It was as visceral and damning as any surveillance photo. I slipped out of bed, the floorboards groaning under my quiet steps, and went to my study. I retrieved the small, hidden flash drive Evan Dean had given me. There was one recording, a particularly agonizing one, that I hadn't listened to since the first time. I needed to hear it again, to let it fortify my resolve, to sever the last threads of denial. I put on my headphones, the quiet click echoing in the silent room. The voices filled my ears, Nolan's, then Geraldine's, clearer, more intimate than ever. They were planning a future trip, discussing how they would explain their absence, their laughter intermingled with soft, possessive endearments. Just a few more weeks, my love, Nolan murmured, his voice laced with anticipation. Then we'll be together, away from everything. And Geraldine, her voice soft and reassuring, I know, darling, it won't be long now. We just have to be careful. Then came the words that twisted my stomach into knots. It's worth it, though. You're worth it, Nolan. The casual mention of our children, of my parents, of the life they were actively dismantling, was delivered with a callous indifference that turned my blood to ice. This wasn't just proof. It was a living, breathing testament to their ongoing deception, their shared future, built on the ashes of mine, the sound of their intimate whispers, their plans, the utter disregard for me and our children, solidified every fragment of pain and fury into an unshakable resolve. This recording, coupled with Geraldine's terrified glance, was the final, undeniable piece. It was the point of no return. My path forward was clear, brutal, and utterly without compromise. I had every piece of evidence, every confirmation of their betrayal. The silent hunt was over. The battle was about to begin. The first casualty of this war, before the fighting even truly began, would be my mother's peace of mind. The recording Evan had given me, coupled with Geraldine's terrified confirming glance, had solidified my resolve. There was no going back, No more hiding in the shadows of my own home. I needed allies, and there were no truer allies than my parents. The following evening, after settling the boys down for the night, I drove the few blocks to their house. My heart a dull thrum against my ribs, each beat a painful countdown to the inevitable. My parents were in the living room, Dad reading a newspaper, Mom knitting. The scene was one of familiar, comforting domesticity, a stark contrast to the earthquake I was about to unleash. "Gloria, sweetheart," Mom exclaimed, her needles clicking gently. "What a surprise! Is everything all right?" Her loving, innocent gaze was a fresh stab. And for a moment, cowardice clawed at my throat. But the faces of Nolan and Geraldine, laughing intimately in the recording, flashed behind my eyes, stealing me. "I need to talk to you both," I said, my voice carefully modulated, devoid of the tremor I felt deep inside. "It's serious." The shift in my tone was enough. Dad lowered his newspaper, his eyes, sharp and assessing, meeting mine. Mom put down her knitting, a frown creasing her brow. I sat opposite them, clasping my hands tightly in my lap, feeling the cold weight of the flash drive in my pocket. I wouldn't allow raw emotion to hijack this. This was a presentation of facts, a cold, hard truth, laid bare. "It's about Nolan," I began, and I saw Mom's breath catch, Dad's jaw tighten. "And Geraldine?" The name hung in the air, an unexpected discord. Mom's frown deepened. "Geraldine? What about her, dear?" I took a deep breath. "I've found evidence that Nolan is having an affair, and it's with Aunt Geraldine." For a long moment, there was only silence, thick and suffocating. Mom's face went utterly blank, then slowly, agonizingly, crumpled. "No," she whispered, the single word a raw, guttural sound of disbelief. Her hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock, searching mine for a retraction, a sign that this was a cruel joke. "Gloria, you must be mistaken. My sister? With Nolan? It's impossible." Dad, ever the lawyer, remained outwardly composed, though I saw the veins throbbing faintly in his temple. "Gloria," he said, his voice low, "what kind of evidence are we talking about?" "Irrefutable evidence, Dad," I replied, my own voice cracking slightly at the sight of Mom's anguish. I pulled out the envelope containing the printed-out bank statements, the credit card bills highlighted with unusual charges, the phone records showing the late-night calls between Nolan and Geraldine. "These are joint accounts, records I have every right to access. Riverside hotel charges, unusual restaurant bills for two, calls lasting over an hour, at odd times." I laid them on the coffee table, a grim, paper trail of deceit. Mom picked up a credit card statement, her fingers trembling as she traced a highlighted charge. "The Riverside." "But Nolan said he was on a business trip that weekend," she murmured, her voice laced with growing horror. Then, I pulled out Evan Dean's surveillance photos, images of Nolan and Geraldine entering the secluded apartment building, of them dining intimately, of their hands clasped in a park, laughing. Mom gasped, a choked sob escaping her lips. Her eyes, filled with tears, darted between the photos and me, a silent plea for it to be a lie. "And this," I said, my voice barely a whisper, pulling out the small flash drive. "This is an audio recording from the private investigator Evan placed." I watched Mom's face contort in pain, tears streaming freely now. Dad reached for her hand, his expression grim. "They're discussing plans," I continued, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Their future, their affection for each other. It's all there." I didn't offer to play it. The visual proof was already too much. "Alice," Dad said, his voice firm, drawing Mom's attention away from the damning photos. "Look at me, sweetheart." But Mom shook her head, burying her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "My sister," she choked out, her voice muffled. "My own sister. How could she? And Nolan, who we welcomed into our family, who you loved." The betrayal from Geraldine seemed to cut her deeper than even Nolan's perfidy. It was an attack on the very fabric of their sisterhood. A lifetime of trust shattered in an instant. Dad wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. His gaze met mine over her head, a silent acknowledgement of the profound devastation I had caused, even though it was not my fault. His eyes, usually so composed, were now filled with a deep, paternal sorrow, but also a quiet resolve. "Gloria didn't choose this, Alice," he said, his voice gentle but unwavering. "They chose this. They chose to lie, to betray. Our job now is to support Gloria, to protect her and the boys." He stroked Mom's hair, letting her cry, offering the quiet strength that had always been his hallmark. "It's a shock. A terrible, gut-wrenching shock. But we will get through this. As a family we will stand by Gloria." He looked at me, a silent promise in his eyes. "You did the right thing, sweetheart. Bringing this to light. The truth is painful, yes, but it's necessary. We will deal with this, together." His words, though spoken amidst my mother's breaking heart, were a lifeline. They anchored me, reaffirming that despite the gaping wounds this revelation had inflicted, the core of our family remained unbroken, united against the lies that sought to tear us apart. The battle had indeed begun, and I was not alone. My father's steady presence, his quiet strength, became my immediate anchor in the tumultuous days that followed that painful revelation. The moment my mother had finally, exhaustedly, cried herself to sleep, Dad had sat me down again in his study. The grief was still etched on his face, but his lawyer's mind was already at work, sharp and analytical. "This is going to be a battle, Gloria," he'd said, his voice grave. "But you won't fight it alone. We need to be prepared, meticulously. Every detail matters." The very next morning, he made a call. And within hours, I was introduced to Alani Matias, a formidable family law attorney specializing in complex divorce cases. Alani was everything I needed: sharp, empathetic, and utterly unflappable. Her office, sleek and modern, felt like a sanctuary of logic after weeks steeped in emotional chaos. With Dad by my side, providing both legal insight and unwavering moral support, we began the daunting task of preparing the divorce papers. The first meeting with Alani was a deep dive into the excruciating minutiae of my life with Nolan. Every asset, every debt, every memory was laid bare, dissected by legal terms that felt sterile and cold against the backdrop of my shattered heart. Alani listened patiently as I recounted the years of our marriage, the children, the seemingly perfect life, and then the gradual, insidious unraveling. She pored over the evidence I had collected with Evan Dean, the bank statements, the credit card charges, the phone records, the surveillance photos, the agonizing audio recording. Her expression remained neutral, professional, but I saw a flicker of genuine shock in her eyes when she reviewed the photographic evidence of Geraldine. "Mrs. Miller," Alani said, her voice calm and measured after reviewing everything, "this is an incredibly strong case. The evidence of infidelity is undeniable, and the fact that it involves a close family member complicates it emotionally. But legally, it strengthens your position for certain considerations." She looked at Dad, who nodded in agreement. Our primary focus immediately shifted to the boys, Jackson and Jeremiah. Their well-being was paramount, the unwavering compass guiding every decision. Alani meticulously outlined fair custody agreements, ensuring their stability and continuity were prioritized above all else. We discussed their schooling, their routines, their emotional needs. The thought of disrupting their innocent world twisted my gut. But Alani assured me that a clear, stable plan, even if it meant a fundamental change, was ultimately better than the prolonged instability of a fractured home. We proposed a clear co-parenting schedule, generous but structured, designed to minimize disruption and maximize their sense of security. It was a cold, hard truth. I was fighting for their future too. Then came the financial settlements. Alani, guided by Dad's experience, worked diligently to ensure the division of assets was equitable, and that I, as the primary caregiver, would be financially secure enough to rebuild a stable home for my sons. We meticulously listed every piece of property, every investment, every joint account. It felt transactional, almost grotesque, to reduce a decade of shared life to columns of numbers. But it was a necessary cruelty. They wanted to ensure Nolan's betrayal didn't leave me vulnerable, that I had the resources to protect my children and myself. Throughout these intense meetings, a strange alchemy began to work within me. Fear still gnawed, a persistent icy dread of the coming confrontation, of the public humiliation, of tearing my family apart. Anger simmered just beneath the surface. A hot, pulsating vein of fury at Nolan's deceit, at Geraldine's callous betrayal. But increasingly, another emotion began to rise. A quiet, unwavering current of empowerment. Each legal document we prepared, each strategy session, was a step towards reclaiming control of my life. A deliberate act of choosing my own path. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a warrior, meticulously preparing for battle, armed with truth and guided by unwavering allies. The weight of the world still felt heavy on my shoulders. But now, I had the tools to push back, to carve out a future where the air was clean, and the ground beneath my feet was solid, built not on lies, but on my own strength. The papers, once a symbol of the end, now felt like the blueprint for a new beginning. The afternoon I chose for Nolan's reckoning was deliberately devoid of fanfare. A quiet Tuesday when the boys were at their after-school program, leaving the house unnervingly still. The silence, once a comfort, now felt like a stage, perfectly set for the drama to unfold. I stood by the kitchen island, the very spot where I'd first heard Geraldine's whispered, "I love you," holding the crisp, intimidating stack of papers that symbolized the end of one life and the forced beginning of another. Alani had counseled me on the timing, on the composure I must maintain. This wasn't a shouting match, it was an execution of justice. When Nolan's key turned in the lock, the sound sent a jolt through me, a primal instinct to flee. But my feet remained rooted. He walked in, tossing his keys onto the ceramic dish, loosening his tie with a familiar sigh. He looked tired, perhaps, but otherwise unchanged, oblivious to the fact that his carefully constructed deceit was about to collapse around him. "Hey, honey," he said, his voice casual, too casual, as he walked towards the refrigerator. "Rough day. Anything good for dinner?" I watched him, a detached observer, noting the easy grace of his movements, the faint scent of his cologne. It was all a lie. Every single thing. My voice, when it came, was steady, a low, even tone that surprised even me. "Nolan, we need to talk." He paused, a glass of water halfway to his lips. Sensing the shift in the air, he turned slowly, his brow furrowing slightly. "Talk? About what, Glo? Is something wrong with the boys?" "No," I said, and a part of me felt a grim satisfaction at his immediate assumption that anything wrong had to involve our children. "Never him. It's about us. About you. About everything." I pushed the thick envelope across the polished surface of the island towards him. The sound of it sliding on the granite was unnaturally loud. He looked at the envelope, then at me, a puzzled expression on his face. He picked it up, his fingers still damp from the water glass. The legal firm's name, embossed on the front, finally registered. His eyes snapped back to mine, wide with dawning comprehension. "What is this, Gloria?" His voice was a whisper, laced with a tremor of disbelief. "It's a petition for dissolution of marriage, Nolan," I stated, my voice as devoid of emotion as I could make it. "Divorce papers." His face drained of color. Shock. Pure, unadulterated shock. He fumbled with the flap, pulling out the first page, his gaze scanning the familiar language of betrayal. Then, denial. "Divorce? What are you talking about? Gloria, this is insane. What did I do? Are you really doing this over a few arguments? Over some late nights at the office?" His voice was rising, laced with feigned indignation. A desperate attempt to frame this as my overreaction. Don't insult my intelligence, Nolan. I cut him off, my voice still quiet, but firm, a cold steel edge beneath the calm. I know everything. His eyes flickered. A subtle, almost imperceptible shift. He tried to laugh. A hollow, disbelieving sound. Everything? What everything? Are you listening to gossip? Are you letting your imagination run wild, Gloria? We have a family, a life. You can't just throw it all away because of some silly suspicion. The attempt at manipulation began. A familiar dance of gaslighting he'd perfected over the years, though I'd never recognized it until now. It's not suspicion, Nolan, I said, taking a step closer, my gaze unwavering. It's proof. Irrefutable. Undeniable. I know about the Riverside Hotel. I know about the apartment. I know about the late-night calls and the credit card charges. And I know about Geraldine. The name landed like a bomb. The air left his lungs in a sudden whoosh. His face went utterly slack, the color draining so completely that I thought he might actually faint. The denial evaporated, replaced by a raw, naked terror. Geraldine? He stammered, his voice hoarse, desperate. What are you talking about? Aunt Geraldine? That's ridiculous. She's your aunt. My friend. Don't bother, Nolan, I said, a faint, bitter smile touching my lips. It's all in there. The phone records, highlighting the dozens of calls stretching back over a year. The credit card statements, with the hotel charges and the dinners for two. The photographs. Evan Dean is very thorough. He recoiled, as if I had physically struck him. Photos? His voice was barely a whisper. He looked utterly broken, his carefully constructed world shattering around him. For a moment, a flicker of something close to pity stirred within me, but it was quickly extinguished by the memory of their whispered endearments, their callous disregard for the life we had built. Yes, Nolan, photos, I confirmed. Of you both. At the apartment, at dinner, holding hands in the park. I met his gaze, letting the full weight of my knowledge settle between us. I heard the recordings, Nolan. Your voices. Her voice. Planning your future. Your love for each other. You make each other so happy, don't you? The sarcasm was barely perceptible. A subtle burn. He dropped the papers onto the island, as if they were burning him. He ran a hand through his hair, his eyes darting frantically around the kitchen, searching for an escape, a loophole. Another lie. Gloria, please, he began, his voice cracking, morphing into a desperate plea. Listen. I made a mistake. A terrible, stupid mistake. It meant nothing, I swear. It was a moment of weakness. She came on to me. I was foolish. Please, don't do this. Think about the boys. Think about our family. We can fix this. I can change. I'll do anything. Please, Gloria, please, don't ruin our lives over one moment of madness. His eyes were glistening, the picture of a repentant husband, begging for forgiveness. This was the manipulation I expected. The desperate attempt to salvage his life by painting himself as a victim, by weaponizing our children, by blaming Geraldine, by minimizing his betrayal. But I was no longer the naive wife who would fall for his charm. You're right, Nolan, I said, my voice cutting through his pleas like a scalpel. You did make a mistake. A prolonged, deliberate, calculated mistake. And it wasn't one moment of madness. It was a conscious choice, repeated over months, years even. This isn't about a few arguments or some late nights. This is about trust, about respect, about the sanctity of our marriage, and the truth you poisoned with your lies. It's about my Aunt Nolan, my mother's sister, my confidant. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. I'm not ruining our lives, Nolan. You both did that. I'm simply choosing to no longer live in the wreckage you created. This isn't a negotiation, it's a declaration. The papers will be served officially tomorrow. You have 30 days to respond. My lawyer, Alani Matthias, will be in touch. I turned, leaving him standing there amidst the ruins of his perfect illusion, his face a canvas of disbelief and despair. The weight that had crushed me for months began to lift, slowly, agonizingly, but undeniably. The hardest part, I knew, was yet to come. Later that evening, after Nolan had retreated to the guest bedroom in a silent, seething rage, I sat Jackson and Jeremiah down on the living room rug, their brightly colored toy cars momentarily forgotten. My heart ached. Not for Nolan, but for their innocent understanding of the world. "Boys," I began, my voice as gentle as I could make it, "Mommy and Daddy have something important to tell you." They looked up, their identical 5-year-old faces filled with innocent curiosity. "Daddy and we've decided that it's better for us to live in separate houses." Jackson's brow furrowed. "Separate houses? Like, you'll live here and he'll live somewhere else?" "Yes, sweetheart," I confirmed, stroking his hair. "Daddy will be moving into a new place. He'll still be your daddy. And I'll still be your mommy. And we both love you more than anything in the whole wide world." Jeremiah, always the quieter one, looked up with big, questioning eyes. "But why? Are you mad at each other?" Sometimes grown-ups realize that even when they love their children very much, they're just better at being friends than being married, I explained, choosing my words carefully, shielding them from the harsh, ugly truths of betrayal and deceit. "It's not your fault, not even a little bit. This is a grown-up decision, and it's about making sure everyone can be happy, even if it means things change a little." I spent the next hour answering their questions, simple and direct, about where Daddy would live, when they would see him, if their toys would still be here. I hugged them close, reiterating over and over that they were loved, that this was about Mommy and Daddy, never about them. Their little faces, initially confused, slowly began to relax, accepting the new reality with the resilience only children possess. As I tucked them into bed, their innocent sleep a stark contrast to the earthquake that had just ravaged my life, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about my freedom. It was about building a safe, honest world for them, free from the shadow of lies that had suffocated me for too long. The confrontation was over. The path to freedom, though fraught with pain, was now irrevocably open. Nolan's retreat to the guest bedroom lasted only 2 days. On the third morning, a Friday, he packed his bags in a silence heavier than any argument, his movements stiff, his face still a mask of disbelief and wounded pride. He didn't look at me, didn't say goodbye to the boys, who were fortunately at school. He simply closed the door behind him, the finality of the click echoing through the unnervingly quiet house. The moment he was gone, a profound sense of release washed over me, a physical lightness I hadn't realized I'd lost. The air felt cleaner, the oppressive weight of deceit suddenly lifted. The house, once a sanctuary tainted by lies, began to breathe again, exhaling the stale memories of Nolan's presence, and inhaling a nascent, fragile freedom. The divorce proceedings, guided by Alani Matias's steely efficiency and my father's quiet counsel, were excruciatingly painful, yet legally straightforward. Nolan, despite his initial bluster, quickly realized the futility of denying the irrefutable evidence. The stack of surveillance photos, the meticulous phone records, the damning audio recordings. They were an impenetrable shield against any attempt at gaslighting or manipulation. Each meeting with Alani, each document signed, was a fresh wound. A sterile dissection of a life I had believed in. But it was also a step forward, a deliberate act of reclaiming my narrative. Nolan's lawyer, a weary-looking man who clearly knew he was fighting a losing battle, could do little more than expedite the inevitable. There were no protracted custody battles, no ugly financial disputes beyond the equitable division Alani had so carefully drafted. The children's well-being was paramount. And even Nolan, stripped of his pride, couldn't argue against the meticulously planned schedule. It was a swift, almost clinical unraveling, made bearable only by the sheer weight of proof and the unwavering support of my legal team. As my life was being legally untangled, another thread, once woven so tightly into my existence, began to fray. Geraldine's attempts to reach me started almost immediately after Nolan moved out. My phone, once a source of comfort, now buzzed with calls from unfamiliar numbers. Then her own name flashing across the screen. My voicemail filled with her frantic apologies, desperate pleas for understanding, tearful explanations that blamed Nolan, or fate, or a moment of weakness. "Gloria, please," she'd sob. Her voice choked with what sounded like genuine anguish. "You have to understand. It wasn't what you think. Let me explain. I miss you. I miss the boys." Her texts were a torrent of similar sentiments, each one a sharp reminder of her betrayal, but I ignored them all. Every call went unanswered, every text deleted unread, every voicemail listened to with a cold, unwavering resolve before being erased. The woman who was my second mother, my confidant, had ceased to exist the moment I heard her voice whisper, "I love you," to my husband. There was no explanation that could mend that rift, no apology strong enough to erase the image of her hand in Nolan's. Severing ties was not an act of anger, but of self-preservation, a necessary amputation to prevent the poison from spreading further into my healing heart. Mom, on the other hand, was a different landscape of pain. The betrayal by her own sister, her beloved Geraldine, cut deeper than Nolan's perfidy. It was an attack on the very fabric of her identity, her family, a wound that seemed to fester with a silent agony. For weeks after the revelation, she walked around in a daze, her eyes red-rimmed, her usual vibrant energy utterly depleted. She barely ate, barely spoke, the joy in her life extinguished by the twin flames of deceit. I saw her visibly shrink, her shoulders hunched as if carrying an unbearable weight. But gradually, painstakingly, she began to resurface. It was her love for me, her fierce protectiveness of her grandchildren, that pulled her back from the brink. She stopped asking about Geraldine, consciously avoiding the name, and instead poured her energy into me, into the boys. She'd come over every afternoon, helping with dinner, reading to Jackson and Jeremiah, her presence a silent, comforting anchor in our turbulent new normal. We found a new, quieter rhythm, born of shared pain but also shared resilience. Her grief over Geraldine slowly, almost imperceptibly, transformed into a fierce resolve to support me, to rebuild our family's core stronger than before. Her solace, she quietly confessed one evening, was in knowing that I was finding my way, that the boys were safe, and that our fractured family, though smaller, was finally, truly, honest. 2 years. 2 full years had spun themselves out since Nolan's silent departure, since the final legal stamp had declared me free. The quiet house, once a chilling testament to shattered trust, now vibrated with a different kind of peace, a profound, hard-earned tranquility. Jackson and Jeremiah, now 7, had blossomed into even more vibrant, articulate versions of themselves, their identical smiles reflecting genuine, untroubled joy. Their resilience, far greater than I could have imagined, had been my most potent medicine. We were thriving, not just surviving. Our life, once a meticulously crafted illusion, was now a tapestry woven with raw honesty and authentic connection, each thread stronger for having been broken and respun. My career, which I had somewhat neglected in the haze of domesticity, had become a renewed source of purpose. I'd thrown myself into my marketing role, finding a fierce satisfaction in creative challenges and professional achievements. The boys were my constant joy, their questions sharp, their hugs endless. Our evenings were filled with story time, boisterous board games, and the simple comfort of being truly present with one another. I spoke to them openly, age-appropriately, about feelings, about changes, about the importance of truth, careful to never poison their view of their father, but always anchoring them in reality. My personal growth, however, was perhaps the most profound transformation. The terrified, paranoid woman who had navigated months of silent betrayal was gone, replaced by someone stronger, clearer, and surprisingly, more hopeful. that transformation hadn't happened in isolation. The initial weeks after the divorce had been a blur of grief and anger, a maelstrom I felt ill-equipped to navigate alone. It was Dad, again, who gently suggested therapy. Sitting in Dr. Elena Ramirez's calm office, slowly unspooling the tangled threads of betrayal, grief and self-blame, was like watching a murky river gradually clear. She helped me understand the stages of healing, to recognize that my anger was valid, my pain necessary, and my strength undeniable. Later, she encouraged me to join a local support group for women who had experienced similar betrayals. Stepping into that room for the first time felt terrifying, exposing my raw wounds to strangers, but in their shared stories, their nods of understanding, their quiet courage, I found a powerful sense of camaraderie. We were a sisterhood of resilience, each of us piecing ourselves back together, learning to trust again, not just others, but ourselves. And what of Nolan and Geraldine? The news reached me not through direct contact. That door remained firmly closed, but through the hushed whispers of the extended family grapevine, relayed carefully by my mother. Their relationship, built on the shifting sands of deceit and opportunism, had crumbled, as predicted, under the weight of its own inherent instability, without the thrill of secrecy, without the illicit excitement. The foundation of their affair had proven flimsy. Geraldine, my mother learned, had become increasingly demanding, Nolan increasingly resentful. Their love, born from treachery, couldn't withstand the harsh light of reality. They had parted ways, not with any grand farewell, but with a whimper of mutual exhaustion and recrimination. It was a confirmation of a truth I had come to understand. Genuine happiness cannot be built on another's pain. Their downfall, though not something I actively sought or celebrated with malice, was a stark validation of my own painful journey. It reaffirmed that my decision, however brutal, had been the right one. It was a lesson in karma, a quiet assurance that authenticity, however challenging to embrace, would always, eventually, win. The echoes of their broken affair, filtered through my mother's cautious reports, had long faded into the background. What remained, strong and vibrant, was the life I had meticulously, lovingly built from the rubble. Maplewood Heights still looked the same, but my perception of it, and my place within it, had fundamentally shifted. The illusion of perfection was gone, replaced by a much richer, more resilient reality. Joy wasn't a curated performance anymore. It was an authentic, deep-seated hum that resonated through my days. A quiet melody of contentment I had forged for myself. This newfound strength wasn't just for me. The camaraderie I'd found in Dr. Ramirez's support group had been a revelation, and I realized there was a hunger for that connection in women beyond its walls. With Dr. Ramirez's blessing and a little help from Dad's network, I founded the Unburdened Path, a support group specifically for women navigating marital betrayal, especially when it involved close family or friends. We met bi-weekly in a quiet community center, sharing stories, strategies, and solace. I didn't position myself as an expert, but as a guide, someone who had walked the path and found light on the other side. Hearing their tentative first steps, their raw pain, and then watching them find their footing, their voices growing stronger, was a profound validation of my own journey. I saw myself in their eyes, and in turn, offered them a reflection of their own potential resilience, a beacon showing them the way out of the darkness I once knew too well. My sons, Jackson and Jeremiah, were my brightest stars. Now 7, their initial confusion over their parents' separation had long since given way to a stable, loving routine. Our bond was forged anew, deeper and more honest than before. We talked openly about feelings, about disappointment, about changes, always careful to emphasize that love could still exist in different forms. I ensured they understood that Daddy loved them, even if our family structure had changed. Our home was filled with laughter, with boisterous board games, with quiet reading sessions, and with the unwavering knowledge that their mother was present, whole, and utterly devoted. The shadow of deceit no longer touched their innocent world. Instead, it was bathed in the clear, steady light of genuine affection and unwavering support. Sometimes, I'd catch my reflection in the kitchen window, a faint smile playing on my lips. The woman looking back was no longer Gloria Miller, the wife of Nolan, the niece of Geraldine. She was simply Gloria, a woman who had faced her darkest fears, meticulously dismantled a life built on lies, and emerged stronger, clearer, and profoundly grateful. The journey had been agonizing. A trial by fire that had burned away everything that wasn't true, leaving behind an irreducible core of self-worth and independence. I had learned that my happiness wasn't dependent on another's fidelity or validation, but on my own unwavering commitment to truth, and my own boundless capacity for love. The scars remained, faint lines on the tapestry of my past, but they no longer defined me. They were simply a testament to the battles fought and won, silent whispers of a strength I never knew I possessed. I was free. Truly, authentically, beautifully free.